Well, thank you very much, and welcome once again to Where Are They Now? And as we've mentioned, joining us in studio today, which is great, Scott Sutton, assistant basketball coach here at Oklahoma State. And Scott and I kind of ran through this on the TV side on Tuesday, but we'll revisit a lot of the things here today on radio. First of all, good to see you. And second of all, I mentioned when we started off our interview on TV, and I had to raise my hand, I wasn't even aware, maybe prior to Tuesday, that the induction ceremony was actually this week, and then you and your family members are going up there. Bittersweet, I would think.
Yeah, it's great to be on with you, TD. They didn't, for some reason, the Naismith Hall of Fame did not do a great job of publicizing that it was going to be this weekend. You know, it was scheduled to be last September, and obviously with COVID and the restrictions, that wasn't going to happen. And they pushed it back to October, and then it got pushed back to, I think, April, and now they finally decided on here in May. And I'm not sure what the main reason is, but we're excited. It like you said, it is bittersweet. It finally happened. I think a lot of people that respect and love or loved my father and mother thought that this should have happened a long time ago, and wish he and my mom could be there to enjoy it, that we could all love on them and support them and cherish this time with them. Another reason, he'd do a great job getting up there and telling some old stories. And
I always have to throw, some of which were probably true and some of which were probably embellished a bit.
Most of them probably were embellished for sure. But and he would have thanked all his great players that helped him win so many games, and he was. I'll remember this as long as I'm alive. That he always said you can't win the Kentucky Derby with a jackass. You need some thoroughbreds, and he had a bunch of thoroughbreds through the years, whether it was at Creighton or Kentucky or Arkansas or Oklahoma State, and certainly had a great deal of some great assistant coaches, and he would have thanked them, and of course he would have thanked the great fan bases. Obviously Kentucky has a great one, but the two that he really, I think, had a special relationship with was his time with Arkansas, and then, the 16 years that he was able to come home and rejoin the family here at Oklahoma State.
Do you have any more of a handle now on the actual itinerary, if you will, for you and Sean and Steve and your families that are going up there? And incidentally, it is not in Springfield.
It's at the Mohegan Sun, and it's a town in Connecticut. And Mohegan Sun, if you follow college basketball, you've probably heard of it because they've had several games and some Thanksgiving type tournaments held there. In fact, I believe, I may be wrong on this, but I think Gonzaga and Baylor last year's regular season game that got canceled because of COVID. A COVID situation was supposed to be held there, I believe. And why it used to be, the only time I've ever been up there was when Bill Self got inducted.
Right.
And the Friday night, which they're still having, is they call it a gala. Obviously, a dinner. They'll call up the inductees. In our case, I suppose it'll be Sean and Steve and myself, and they present them with a Hall of Fame ring and a Hall of Fame jacket. And that was held at the Mohegan Sun, I guess it was 4 or 5 years ago when Coach Self got inducted. And then Saturday always took place in Springfield. Not sure why they're putting everything together this year. Maybe COVID, maybe the Kobe Bryant factor that he's going in along with just a star-studded cast with Kevin Durant or Kevin Garnett, Tim Duncan, and of course Kobe, three of the best players who ever played. I told you yesterday, 48 All-Star appearances between those three, which is amazing.
Not to mention Kim Mulkey, who's going in.
Yes, I think 2 or 3 time national champion, and so I'm not sure if they wanted more space, maybe some social distancing that the casino offered, maybe a bigger venue.
Now you guys are going up tomorrow, so you get a chance to kind of get your feet on the ground, literally and figuratively, after you fly in. What's the feel from Sean and Steven and your family members? I mean, excited to see this happen, but certainly somewhat melancholy that it didn't happen 6 years ago when he could be here and your mom was here.
Yeah, I think that's probably the main feel that we have, that we waited so long and kind of, I guess the two previous times, especially the one that happened, I guess 2 years ago, that we really felt great about. I'm not sure my father could have gone up there and gave a speech, but he could have been there and been able to see a lot of people, and he really would have enjoyed that. But yeah, it is bittersweet. You wish the guy worked, coached for so long, and I always say it's not like he won a bunch of games from, was it 2007 when he took over for San Francisco, or 2008, whenever that was, and until he got inducted last year. He didn't win any games.
Right.
He didn't. His resume didn't prove one bit. So why they waited, who knows?
I was going to say, it doesn't do any good, and I have to pull myself up short all the time, maybe dwelling on the why not and who didn't like. And maybe someday you'll come across the reason why, or the reasons why. But the fact is, it's happening, and that's the main thing. I mentioned to you on the TV side too. To me, another big tragedy is that your mom is not here, because in my mind, two of them were going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame.
No doubt. I mean, they were a team. You talk about was married for over 50 years, and she met him right here in Stillwater. She grew up in Stillwater, and I have some great pictures of her sitting on my dad's bench at Tulsa Central keeping stats. And, they wrote I think the Tulsa World, maybe been Bill Connors, I'm not sure, wrote a story about her, and that had to be in the early 60s, late 50s, about being a part of, kind of his staff, being a coach's wife. But he always said she was his number one assistant coach, and I think some people were taken aback by that, said, what are you talking about? And it was never about X and O's. It was about a partnership that they had, that whatever he celebrated, she celebrated, and that she was a part of those programs, because she did a lot to guide and to mentor and to love on a bunch of young kids that needed it when my dad, especially early on,
was not a love-on
yes,
guy. Yeah.
He could get on guys pretty hard, and they needed somebody to be there for him. And I thought my dad always did a great job of, if he ever got on somebody, he'd make sure by the end of practice he was over there putting his arm around them. But still, if motherly love, kind of being a second mother, and we've talked about it. Talked about it on the TV show, a couple of guys that who knows where their lives would have been if not for my mother and my dad. And that's Darryl Walker, who was a great player at Arkansas, went on and played, had a long career in the NBA, was an NBA head coach, who's now the head coach at University of Arkansas Little Rock. He came a lot like Tony from a tough part of Chicago, needed some guidance, needed somebody to instill discipline in their lives, and they were able to do that. And I think both those guys would tell people that if it wasn't for my dad and my mother, that their lives would not have turned out the way they've turned out.
I'm not sure in all the times we've ever sat around and talked, either on or off the air, I've ever asked you this. I've witnessed them, so I guess I shouldn't be asking you this, but you remember the hardest your dad ever got on you when you played for him?
Oh yeah, I don't know if I should say this on air, but we were
somewhat cleaned it a little bit, but
yeah,
we want to hear it. We want to hear it.
I kind of got in a skirmish with somebody at practice.
Yeah, you did.
And I was a senior, and the young man was a freshman, and a freshman or sophomore, I can't remember, but he wasn't real happy. He kicked me out of practice, and I think he since he was my dad, he felt like he didn't really push me, but he nudged me about the length of the basketball court and told me to go hit the showers. And but you know what? By the time I went home that night and ate dinner, and then it was over. And that's how he was with all the players. He would get on them, and he wasn't a big. He didn't cuss. Very rarely did he cuss, but he knew how to get on guys like no other. But he also knew that if he didn't come back and show them that, hey, the reason I'm doing this is because I care for you and because you can do better and I believe in you, then it wouldn't work. But he did those things, and those guys eventually understood, hey, he's got my best interest, and he's just doing this to push me, to make me better. And I think that's what great coaches do.
I think I remember the skirmish, as a matter of fact.
I'm sure you were there.
I remember the guy hitting the floor, as a matter of fact. But, and here's old mild-mannered Scott Sutton. He never would do anything, but you got hacked off on the screen.
I think it was one of those, those Thanksgiving or Christmas break practices.
When you didn't want to be there to begin with.
And probably the second 3.5 hour one of the day. and we may have been coming back from, who knows. I mean, that year, my senior year, we had the fiasco of the trip to Hawaii when we lost 2 out of 3 games.
That wasn't a very pleasant trip. No.
And we took the red eye back and landed in Oklahoma City and said, okay, as soon as we get back, we'll hit the practice floor.
And you did, as a matter of fact.
We certainly did.
We talked about your mom again, and I've said this 1,000 times, and she was, to me, she was a breath of fresh air. And again, your dad would embellish stories, but the only person he could never put the story over on was your mom. And your mom would, even when we were on the radio, your dad would be talking about, getting up at 3 a.m, milking cows and doing the hay baling, and then finally getting to go to school at 5 and walking in the snow. I mean, he would go on, and she would let him finish the story. She'd say, Eddie, that's not the way it happened. Only she could do that.
She's the only one, and she could talk to him and get through to him, and she knew all the stories because they were together for so long. And
she knew when they were just being stretched a bit.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
I think I read correctly that Self, Calipari, and who am I listening?
Sidney Moncrief.
Are they all going to have a role in the presentation?
Well, to each inductee gets presented, which means this: if my father was still alive, those 3 guys would walk up with them to the stage, and stand behind him while if he was able to give a speech. They have to be members of the Naismith Hall of Fame. Whoever presents you has to be a member. They don't talk, they don't speak, to my knowledge. But when we started talking about this, Sean and Steve and I, obviously Coach Self was a no-brainer. He was to be honest, he was a big reason. Him and Coach Hamilton. My dad always gave them credit and gave Coach Hamilton credit for leaving a lot of really good players when he took over Oklahoma State. They hadn't had a ton of success. I think they were kind of a NIT type team
the
previous 2 years. But when you leave a coach, a guy like Byron Houston and Corey Williams and Darwin Alexander and John Potter and Johnny Pittman, and you throw in Sean to that group, all of a sudden you got a team that competes for Big 8 championships like they did and gets to the Sweet 16. And those 2 teams, if you remember, they get beat by Temple when Corey Williams' toe is on the line.
Yeah, that's right.
That only counted as a 2, or they go on to the Elite 8.
Right.
And then the next year they get beat by a team with the Fab Five of Michigan that goes on and plays Duke for the national championship.
It just so happens they sent us to Lexington, which is what a surprise.
So he always gave credit to, and Coach Self obviously was a big part of probably recruiting a lot of those kids. And then Sidney Moncrief was arguably the best player he ever coached. I mean, he was a guy that was multiple All-Star, made multiple All-Star teams. Was certainly the best player he coached at Arkansas. He was part of the triplets that made the 1978 Final Four. He came back as the only triplet that didn't finish schooling the year before with Ron Brewer, went on to the NBA, and Marvin Delph had graduated. And Sidney, as a senior, almost beats Indiana State, who was led by a guy named Larry Bird. And then, of course, Indiana State went on and played Michigan State for the national championship that year. So those two were no-brainers. And then, Coach Calipari and my dad became really close.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, after the '95 final team beat his UMass team in East Rutherford, they became good friends. And then when Coach Calipari got the Kentucky job, he did a really good job of trying to ease the pain that or whatever you want to call it between the Kentucky fans and my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And he always talked about my dad, and my dad would go over and watch his teams play when they played in Fayetteville, and so he was really good to him, and we just felt like in the Kentucky connection, we had a guy from Oklahoma State, a guy from Kentucky, a guy from Arkansas, and those were, the three biggest programs that he coached at, and probably had the most success. Now you could go say Creighton made it the Sweet 16, but you can't have 4 or 5 guys doing that.
Sure.
It just felt like, and I'm not sure Creighton has, to be honest, anybody in the Naismith Hall of Fame. I'm not sure who that would be if they do.
No, nothing comes to mind there, huh?
So we just came and decided on those 3.
Now, you made mention again before we wrap up the actual Hall of Fame talk here. That Sean did a taped
Yeah.
a portion.
Since obviously since my dad's not with us, they wanted one of us to give a speech, and initially we all were going to get together at somewhere in Tulsa, maybe wherever, and be there together, and one of us would give the speech, and we thought Sean would do a great job, and Sean spent so many years, and I got to spend 3 years playing for him, and believe me, I didn't win him a whole lot of games personally, but
Yes.
yeah. But Sean was with them was a starting point guard for 2 of the teams. Oklahoma State played 2 years with him or for him at Kentucky.
But you didn't lose us any games, so I'll give you credit there.
Well, some would argue that probably, but and then he was an assistant for however many years he coached here, for 16 years, I guess. So he was a big part of a bunch of wins,
Mm-hmm.
and a big part of 2 Final Fours and a couple Big 12 championships. So we just thought it'd be the best fit for Sean to do.
Have you seen it?
I have not. So we couldn't get together. So Sean taped it, I think, last week. And,
Okay.
They'll show that when during the induction.
Want to hop to a couple of other things while we got you in here. You were telling me in baseball, we were discussing that because baseball's got a big series with Baylor coming up here this weekend. A connection between you and the Trinkle name. How about that?
When we go back and tell my dad took over. He was coaching Tulsa Central. He played for Mr. Iba, obviously. He got done in '58. I think he spent 1 year to finish his master's degree. So he spent 1 year as student coach. They call them GAs now, graduate assistants. And then Mr. Iba got him a job over in Tulsa at Tulsa Central.
Mm.
And he spent 7 years coaching and had a lot of success. And he's said many times he always just thought he'd be a high school basketball coach, and he had so much respect. I think that's why throughout his career, he had so much respect for high school coaches, because he knew he coached against some really good ones in that area during the late 50s and early 60s. But I think in 1966, the spring of 66, a guy named James Taylor, who was the president of a small junior college out in Twin Falls, Idaho, it's called College of Southern Idaho, called him and said, "Hey, I heard a lot of great things about you. I'd love to interview you for our job." And he was like, "Oh, I don't," he saw himself as a high school coach, and what do we know about Idaho? And my mom's parents were 60 miles down the road here in Stillwater, 70 miles. But he's always said he was the best salesman he ever met, because he convinced him and my mom to take a drive across the country and take a look at CSI, which they call it. And he he got there, and they started looking for the campus. They stopped at the gas station and said, "Hey, where's this College of Southern Idaho?" And they're like, "Well, the administration building's it's right down this road and take a left." And so they pull up, and it's just a modest-looking building. Could be any type of store. They walk in, and they meet Dr. Taylor, and he's like, "Where's campus?" He said, "Well, I forgot to tell you, we haven't built campus yet." And so the first couple of years, I think maybe all 3 years, they took night classes. The players did. They played at the high school, and he went on, and I think he had an 83-15 record. So no matter where he went, he always won. And it got me off the question that you
on
asked.
Trinkle.
Oh, yeah, Trinkle.
Yeah.
But anyway, Fred Trinkle, who is Caden's grandfather, played for my father at College of Southern Idaho. And then he was an assistant for my dad at University of Arkansas. And Caden's dad, Swede, and I are the same age, and we kind of grew up together and became really good friends. Swede's a junior college coach in Texas and has done a great job. And he told me a few years ago that OSU was really recruiting Caden hard. And so I was thrilled when he got here. And then last year with COVID, I couldn't really get to see him play because the time we got out of basketball, they canceled basketball and baseball at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so I've enjoyed watching Caden play. He's a heck of a player and tough, and seems like he represents everything you want in the first-class program.
Yeah, we talked about it on the TV side. I think he'll go down in my mind as one of the premier leadoff guys we've ever had. He's a tough-minded kid, and he's a guy, if you're throwing against him, you don't want to see him because he's not going to give you anything. You're going to have to earn every pitch that you throw. Portal, recruiting, soon you'll be able to actually see kids face to face. How's this been?
Been crazy. I mean, this past year has just been really the year, 14, 15 months. I mean, we hadn't been out to be able to see kids since, I guess late February last year, because, once you get into March last year, you're thinking about the Big 12 tournament, and there wasn't a whole lot of recruiting going on that time. And maybe early March, we maybe got out and saw some kids. But everything's been online, watching on computer, checking all these names that every single day to continue to go into the portal has been crazy. And it's kind of the new recruiting, especially in the spring. I think you'll see a lot of high school kids, or most of the high school kids will sign in the fall now from now on. And then once you get to the spring, I think most programs are going to be looking at that portal every single day, seeing how they can improve their roster, because I think you're going to have to rebuild your roster every single season. We've been fortunate we haven't lost anybody, but there's teams that have lost 8, 9, 10 guys off a 13-man roster. And I think we'll probably end up signing 4 guys this spring, and I think all 4 of them will probably come out of the portal. We've already got 2, the young man Tariq Smith from Texas Tech, and then Woody Newton out of Syracuse. So, and I think that if we're fortunate, we'll sign 2 more that will come out of the portal.
You really like the Smith guy, and for probably a main reason that you had the Texas Tech scout last year, so you were very familiar with this guy who was wearing a different uniform. Yeah,
I'm just more familiar with him because I had recruited him. We'd recruited him in high school. He had, in fact, played for a coach whose son played for Barry Henson and me at Oral Roberts, a guy named
really?
Chad Wilkerson. Chad's dad coached Tyreek at a small Christian school in Dallas, and then scouting Tech twice this past year. He didn't play a ton of minutes, but every time he was on the floor, he made an impact. He played his no one played harder. No one played harder. I don't think anyone is more athletic. I think his skill level's better than what he's been able to show. And the greatest thing is you're getting a guy that he redshirted at Tech 2 years ago.
Right.
He got some experience this year. So you got a guy that's going to come in as a freshman, has 4 years, that's been coached by a Texas Tech staff that's pretty good. So the guy's been coached. He's played at the highest level, and he's coming in as a freshman. So I think he's going to be a really good fit for us, and I'm just more familiar with him. Woody Newton was probably a more highly sought-after kid coming out of high school, a different kid. He's more of a perimeter 3-4 that can really shoot it. He kind of got stuck behind a couple of older guys at Syracuse, and we feel fortunate to get him as well.
Really, not a whole lot of surprise, I guess, for you guys that Avery Anderson put his name in, got grades, came back. He's back. I don't know if likely was ever a situation where he leaving, but those are two good pieces to have back, knowing when you start drills again, they're going to be there.
No, two really experienced players that have won a bunch of games, that have played in played in big time, played 3 times against the national championship team last year, and Avery, just I tell you, TD, it's such a credit to him that he was up and down as a freshman, like most freshmen are, and he worked his tail off. He had things he needed to work on. He needed to become a better, more consistent shooter. He needed to tighten his handles and make better decisions. He reminded me of a young Corey Williams, because he's so quick and fast. He just got ahead of himself a lot, and the game's a different speed from high school to Division I, obviously, especially at this level. But I tell you, if I walked in the gym at Gallagher, Iowa, Monday through Friday, and I heard a ball bouncing, one or two guys, and a lot of times both those guys were in there, and that's Avery and then D. Mitchell, who was our walk-on that coach rewarded him with a scholarship last semester. But it proves that hard work pays off, because there wasn't very many guards in our league, take away maybe the 3 guys at Baylor who were just unbelievable, and then Cade, that played better down the stretch in our league. And remember what he did against West Virginia on the road without ice and without Cade. And so I think he was, I think people probably said, hey, you might as well put your name in. It's not going to hurt you. You can still come back. There's no penalty. You get feedback from the NBA. Where they see you right now, what you need to work on, and that's what he did. And he made a mature decision, which we knew he would. And he knows that he needs to come back and improve on some things. Getting stronger is one, and although he is a strong, especially for his size, but maybe gaining some weight, because over an 82-game schedule, that you need to be able to handle that. But he did that, and I think he'll have a fantastic season next year.
Well, you look at, it worked out well for Butler from Baylor. I think he did the same thing, and he came back. Last thing, in general, this could be said about everybody on the roster. I understand that. But anybody in particular that needs to, from today to the time we actually get back into team workouts, that really needs to pick up their game? And I know this applies to everybody on the roster.
I think it's a huge spring, summer / fall for a lot of our guys, but I think 3 guys that or maybe 4 guys that contributed, and some quite a bit for us, but we can see taking a similar step that Avery took from his freshman year to sophomore year. In this case, a couple of them sophomore to junior, but M.A. Alexander or Moncrief, M.A. Moncrief, is a guy that obviously had a good freshman year. I think he can really take another step and be a guy that can be one of the better type of players in our league, a guy that's a high-energy rebounder, does a lot of different things. The Boone twins certainly improved, but I think there's still a lot of room for improvement from those two, especially gaining some weight. I think Caleb needs to get up to 220, 225. And
can his body take that?
I mean, I think Jake's one of the best strength coaches in the country, and he thinks he can. He thinks he can.
Wow.
A lot of it's about eating.
Yeah.
It's about habits, about eating several times a day and eating the right things. And Keelan, needs to get up to 215, and he needs to live in the gym and make 500 shots a day, and be a guy that's 6'7", 6'8", that can be a guy that stretches the floor, because he does a lot of really good things. And going back to Caleb, I thought Caleb made a great deal of improvement from freshman to sophomore, but I think Caleb could be a type of guy that could be an all-conference type player. I really believe that. And then Rondell Walker's the other one.
Right.
That Rondell had a lot of really good things happen this year for him. A lot like Avery, he was up and down at times, but he's a guy that, I think in the time he's a junior, senior, you're looking at, he's potentially an all-conference type player as well.
Well, that was a quick run around the roster. And again, one last look at the Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Your family's going to be there. Actually, the dinner Friday night, and then I think late Saturday afternoon around here, and we found out it's going to be on ESPN, I believe.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
So, there'll be a lot of people watching that, to say the least. A lot of people are still invested in the Eddie Sutton story. But, congratulations to you and your family. I know this is long overdue. I'll be anxious to talk to you guys when you get back. But as much as you can, I'm sure you're going to try to enjoy yourselves while you're there.
We will. It's a special time for our family, and it'll be good to see some people that I know a lot of his friends will be up there, and of course Coach Self and Coach Calpar in Sydney, and I'm sure there'll be some other. I know Country's going, so it'll be great to see a lot of familiar faces.
Well, Scott, always like catching up with you, man.
You bet, TD. Thanks for having me on.
You got, and unlike your dad, most of your stories are true. I mean, except that one where you got in a skirmish. I'll have to tell that story when
Please
you're not
don't.
here. Well, I'll make you sound good though. I'll make you sound like you won the fight. Hey, that's it for today's.
I did win the fight.
Yeah, I know that was the problem your dad had with you. As a matter of fact, he was not happy with the whole thing. But, that's Where Are They Now for this week. Appreciate Scott being with us. And, again, we'll all be watching this weekend and sharing the pride that the Sutton family has when you get to Eddie's induction. That'll be really good.
Thanks, Tom.
All right, buddy. Appreciate you coming in. That's it for the Where Are They Now. I think Doug's going to be coming up here next. Everything gets underway tomorrow again with Steve in the morning. We run right through. So until we talk to you again, have a good night.